G'day, welcome back. Today I'm continuing the series on blunders in World Chess Championship candidates tournaments, and we've got all the way along to 1965. Now, in terms of the World Championship, which we've covered before, this was in the 1966 World Championship match between Spassky and Petrosian. Petrosian won that, and then Spassky came back in 69 and beat Petrosian. So that's sort of the background to it. So if we just look at the candidates match itself, is just the Wikipedia page about the match. It started off with the 1964 interzonal tournament in Amsterdam. Now, because of Fischer's complaints about the previous cycle, this cycle they decided that the candidates after the interzonal would be 8-player matches. So 4 quarterfinals, 2 semifinals, and the final. 10 games for the quarterfinals and the semifinals, and 12 games for the final. So it's now a match format, and it stayed that way basically until let's say the split in 93, and then it's sort of been all different sorts of methods since then. So you had the interzonal, which was in Amsterdam. Actually, having sort of complained and got the changes, Fischer didn't participate in this cycle. Obviously, as was typical with him, he had some complaints about the matches weren't long enough or whatever, right? So bear in mind, it's not the first or last time we'll encounter that. And then you can see the outcome there. This is the interzonal, we're not on the candidate yet. So you got Smyslov, Spassky, Tal, basically 3 current or former world champions, and Bent Larsen all tied on 70 points. There's something wrong with this table because all these ones here towards the side. Where's the zeros? There's no zeros, right? And Lenenstein and Bronstein both missed out. I don't know why when they changed the match format, they still had that limit of 3 players from one country. It doesn't seem to make any difference at that stage. But anyway, so that's them's the rules. So Stein, I don't think he ever got to the candidates, or he sort of missed out with a rule like that. But it shows you the competition, right? In terms of you had to be a very, very good Soviet player to be able to make it to the candidates. So you ended up with Ivkov and Portisch. I think you want to play off against Reshevsky. So that's the list of players. We've got Smyslov, Larsen, Spassky, Tal, Ivkov, Portisch, and then we've still got Geller and Keres from last time, first and second in the candidates then. So that gives them their places. And you can see the candidates here. Spassky beat Keres, Spassky beat Geller, Spassky beat Tal, and then Spassky lost to Petrosian. Now, I don't know, presumably there was some type of seeding here in terms of the way or maybe it was just by lots. And I think this is the last time we see Keres. So that's, ever since, like, if you include Avro 1938, he's been there for a hell of a long time, coming second 4 times, I believe. So, and also participated in the 1948 tournament. So one of the best players never to become champion. And so what I'm going to do is run through each of these matches and pick out a few blunders. I've got 8 blunders, so it's basically about 1 blunder per game, a match, and we'll have a look at what impact they have. And obviously just look at the blunders. So the blunders now, I mean, we're in a new era where it's not like Chigorin versus Stein. These games are very high quality. The blunders tend to be a little bit more complicated, and a lot of them end up being sort of endgame inaccuracies and in time trouble and all that sort of stuff, right? So the standard play is much, much higher at this point. So I don't know if that's better or worse for my little project here. And at least we get a good sense of the history of it and the championship match. Okay, so just briefly, there's the Aussie guy who actually participated. Didn't do very well, but I think that so Leos, Steiner, Bella, Berger, and Ian Rogers, the 3 Aussies who have made it to interzonals. So that's an interesting factoid there. So let me get that out of the way. I'm just going to show you one thing, because obviously it gets more complicated every time I do this. Things change. It's a match, and then it's a tournament, and then it's a match again, and now they've got these semi-finals. So the data I'm working with is, I think, PG Mentor originally, and you can just get a sense of it, right? So that to do this, just in case you want to know, the date's relevant, so I put the date in, and then I use this field in the event. It's just going through Python to get the event. If it's QF1, then it's the first match, and then so on. And you can see obviously the eval. I should put that field in myself. That's the evaluation, and that's the material balance, and that's what I use for the determining whether there's a blunder or not. So just park that off to the side, and then just to show, for instance, right, the sort of thing we will be running. Bit too much, but let me just have a look. Let's go 1965 and we'll go QF1. Oh, there's another parameter there I'd forgotten about. Let's do that. This does the blunder checking for me, and then comes up with the chart. So this is the quarterfinal one, which is, you can see Tal versus Portisch. And you can see there's a couple of blunders here we're going to look at. And there's a lot of blunder and blunder, like both players blunder during these games. Now, I'm going to say that you look at that, Tal won that with a +3, so I don't think blunders have any particular impact on this outcome. And looking at that, so I think when it's red, it's that guy. So you can see Portisch actually did do 3 blunders in here, but you can see that I think there's a Tal there and a Tal there. So Tal did do blunders, but we're just going to cover, I think she look at one game in this actually, which was a clear blunder. And just give you a sense of how it works. So, and for instance, and you can see here's the score. See blunders by player Portisch, blunders by player Tal. So just slightly in Tal's favour, but of course, yeah, he won the match 3, so that's fairly clear. And out of the way, you don't really need to see that. And there's the chart of the game we're going to look at. You can see this is quite an early blunder. So let's get started on this game. So this is a fairly straightforward blunder by Portisch, to the extent that they are straightforward. Now, let's have a look at the continuation. Rook takes e6, because what you'll see here is that, go back a move, we've got 1, 2, 3 pieces defending that pawn, and there is 1, 2 pieces backing it. Okay, fine. So you'd think one piece dropping off matter, but let's have a look at continuation. Rook takes e6, goes check in, takes, and then what is the problem here? If you take back with the queen, can you see what happens? Let's do that continuation. Take back with the queen. There's a missed knight fork. Okay, so that's what Portisch missed. He didn't actually take back with the queen. He took the pawn. And although this doesn't lose material like the other line does, back with the queen, problem is that it's very close to being checkmated now. So let's have a look at the game continuation. He moved his rook back, which is probably a good thing, because the rook is on a sort of potentially discovery checked square, and white's exchanged down, but he's got a couple of pawns to the advantage. So rook d8 was played, and then now various ways of winning. Knight e5 was a move which was played, and then the best move in my engine is to take the bishop off, because knight e5, yeah. So that's can't protect all those squares. There's obviously a killer check on d6. If you do that, then the pawn on h6 is likely to drop, and there's knight forks and queen checks and all sorts of things on the f7 square. So it doesn't look pretty. Queen takes e6 given. Let's say queen c7 to try and cover across the 7th rank. Well, that then it's actually made pretty quickly, right? So you can see, if you go back to this original position, where you can see queen c6 is a suggested move, because you need 3 pieces defending the pawn on e6, and actually you're supposed to be able to hold. Continuation might be queen c6. I don't think I did a continuation, but let's look. Queen c6, take the pawn back. There's nothing catastrophic happening here, right? So that was a bit of a shocker by Portisch. Okay, so that was the only one I had from that match. So now we're going to move on to the next match. Let me just bring that up. Okay, so it's Larsen-Ivkov, and the game we're going to look at is round 3. Now this is Larsen, obviously. I think this is his first real showing here. He's obviously the best of the West. Became his title effectively, and obviously he's the coming man, right? So, and if you have a look at the profile there, the main blunder is actually by Larsen in allowing a draw. If you look at the profile on the bottom right there, and that's what we're going to have a bit of investigate. Go to the key position. Yeah, okay. Now this is one of those positions where one's head will be spinning a little bit by the end, but this is a position which, if played accurately, the big question here, white will win. If played inaccurately, then it peters out to a draw. You can see it's all those bishops on the same color. White only has that 1 pawn advantage, so it's obviously borderline anyway, but white has a pair of protected passed pawns on the queen side, which, if they could be defended, that would be useful, but black has a dangerous h pawn. It's just the interaction of those which determines whether it's a win or a draw. And what we'll do is we'll do the game continuation, which ended up being a draw, and then we'll see what happened in that line, and then that'll help us frame our sort of assessment of the position and work out why or how Larsen could have won this game. As I say, you look at the profile of the match there, to bring it up, let me just say it, is that Ivkov made 4 blunders and Larsen made 2. That's kind of the sort of the count I'm looking at. But as I say, a position like this would be counted one, an Ivkov blunder and a Larsen blunder, so it's not entirely clear the overall outcome. Obviously, Larsen, once again, +3 wasn't, I don't think the match itself was ever in particular doubt. So Larsen played bishop to e1, and you can see there are a couple of other alternative moves there, which are both winning, and it's more about does bishop to e1 do anything? So let's have a look at this. e6 does 2 things. It pressures the f pawn, but also gives the king a route, which didn't use that route, but now the black king was going to get to c4 either way. So you can see that the king gets around, grabs the c pawn, and now the bishop's covering both pawns on a single diagonal. Something has to be done about this pawn as well. And just look at the way this gets drawn. Black actually goes back to pick off the b pawn, which is a white square. That's easy. And you can see the problem here. This pawn is going to just be taken. So that will be a draw. He waited to the last minute. White wasn't quick enough either holding the pawns which were here or getting that pawn moving. Now let's go way back to this move. You see the red dot where Larsen missed his chance. Okay, so what we're going to play, there's 2 lines. Let's do king to h3. For me, that's most natural. I mean, king f3 wins as well. King h3. Let's see how this line works. Okay, well, same deal. Black obviously has to get this pawn. So white is capturing the h pawn. Black moves up. It moves up. KC pawn's gone. And now you see the issue is that white, in 2 moves, that pawn's going to start moving. So black takes off the b pawn, and this is winning. Let's have a look at the continuation. g6. So it's where can that bishop block the pawn? Black's king is too far away. Bishop gets forced away from the key diagonal. Pop it on the other diagonal. Drive it off the diagonal. Right. So black king had been there already. Maybe we'd be talking a different environment. But okay, pawn's advanced, and now the pawn's gone too far. And remember that rule, you need both diagonals to have a length of at least 4. This diagonal is only length of 3, so this also works out being a win. Obviously, we're just going to move our bishop and drive the other bishop away. In this sort of tactic before, now we can divert, and that's it, because diagonal's too short. Remember, the king is covering these 2 squares, and the bishop can cover 1 more square. So that's everything's covered, and we will be advancing our pawn. Okay, look, so that's really interesting. There's a lot more we could look at in that in terms of the bishop endgame, but if we go back to this key position, you can see the winning strategy there was just advance the king, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves, and the pawn gets started. Whereas black, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. His king's in the wrong position. If his king was either in front or sort of pressuring from behind, I think they're the 2 positions when he would have been able to hold that position, but he wasn't able to. And then the game continuation was much easier because the bishop and the king could handle both the pawns which were left over. Okay, good. So that's that. Let's move on to the next game, which is another Ivkov Larsen one, and this one I've called a shocker. Let me just quickly bring up the chart for it. There you go. We can see it's what the chart shows, right? Trundling along, and then a sudden mistake. Okay, this position is drawn. It's not really a shocker, but it's a missed tactic, right? So a3 was played, and then the game is practically over. So what's going on here? I've highlighted a square. Just have a quick look. It's a really strange tactic, actually. So look, game continuation. Rook to c4, pressuring the bishop. Bishop can't be held. Bishop moves, and then now you can see pressure on the g pawn. Quite neat, quite cute, and obviously white's going to lose his queen for a rook, so that will be lost. You get back to this position here. I mean, a3 was played. I mean, anything works. Moving the bishop's the best possibility. You can even move it there, right? Stops that rook maneuver, right? So if we go back 1 move, So it was Queen F5 was playing, which actually sneakily covers this square for that maneuver with all those threats. 4. So that was this one here. I think we looked at this one where there was blunders by both players, round 3, and round 4. That's where Ivkov blundered and work out what my coding is. So this is green means Larsen benefit from that. Okay, so the next game we're going to look at is Keres Spassky. Now, see, Keres lost this, won't see him again, and then Spassky went through Keres and Geller and Tal. What a lineup to challenge the Trojan. Okay, cool. So let me get this this one loaded up as well. Let's see what happened to this one. I need to get the game loaded up. This one does well. It is the overview of the match, and it's basically they both made a couple of blunders. Spassky won +2, 6-4, so fairly comfortably, I'd say. But obviously, it was could have come back. And then what we're looking at here is the second one. You can see this is where it ended up being a draw. But look at a couple of positions. No, we're going to look at this position here. We're going to look at this position here. This is a winning position for black, and you can see from the chart Spassky missed his chance and repeated out to a draw. Night endgames. Night endgame draw is very tricky, so just spend a little bit of time looking at it and see what you think. Okay, so unfortunately my recording bombed, so I'm doing this again. I might do it a bit more quickly than I normally do, just to go through it. Okay, so this is the position, and there is a couple of lines which win, which Spassky did not play. Let's go through the game continuation first, which is knight to d5. There's the other lines there, which are pretty good, which is it's just not forcing enough. And I mean, basically, you just take the c pawn off, which is what happened, and then check and check. Now, you might look at this position and say, well, black effectively just gave up a pawn. Why is that no good? Well, I mean, basically now you go king takes f4. Wasn't played. Knight b6 was played, so knight b6. You see how this is going to peter out to a draw, right? And I think that's fairly obvious. Let's see how much longer they go on for. Yeah, so it's a draw, right? But at this stage, you could have just grabbed that f pawn straight away. But it's 3 versus 3. I mean, black does kind of threaten in some ways to go across and pick up the h pawn, but various ways of drawing. c4 is probably the cleanest. Take, and this looks very drawn. Looks very drawn to me. Okay, so let's go back to this position here, and there's the main winning line. So the c4 is also possible, but knight f1 check. Be a bit more forceful. So we've got to move the king somewhere. Let's try king e2. Keep the pressure on the knight. There's 2 ways of winning here. The one line I think I had is this check. You take. Got to take back because otherwise the pawn goes through, and now you hop back to e4. Now you're holding your c pawn, you're threatening white's c pawn, and let's see how this game might continue. Move king across. Right, okay, so you'd still say this looks fairly balanced, but see this situation here, you know how it takes like 4 moves to get that pawn defended, so we just hop in there, and then so those 2 queenside pawns are obviously going to defeat the knight, and if the king goes across, then white then does scoop up both kingside pawns and will win with his h pawn. So did I have another line to have a look at? Oh yeah, back in this position, c4 line. It's the knight. Knight's got to move, do the check as we did before. King's got to move, and then actually what we do now is we take c-pawn. C-pawn's got to take back, and I think we're going to have once again a lot of trouble protecting that pawn. So if we move the king cross to stop the knight going there, then we just fork it from d5, and you can see that pawn's going to drop, and then probably the h pawn's going to drop. So that's the way to have done it. The knight d5 move played was very, very passive and just sort of fell into a very drawn position. So that was something to think about in knight endgames. Got to be very accurate. Calculate carefully the lines and what final position you end up with, if it's a win or a draw. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Let's move on to the next game. I didn't find one from Geller-Smyslov, so we're going to skip that quarterfinal and then move forward to the semi-finals. And the first one we're going to look at is the one between Tal and Larsen. Okay, one thing I did while I re-recorded this is make the charts a little bit smaller, make them fit nicer. But you can see this is in the semi-final number 1. You can see it is very tight. Tal only won on the final game, and you can see it was Larsen was ahead a couple of times. So this was very close. Obviously, highlighting how strong a player Larsen was. You can't see it, but I just saw looking at my summary of it. It's blunders by Larsen 3, blunders by Tal 2. So, that's, you'd argue maybe the blunders had some sort of bearing on the outcome. And this game is one such case. You can look at the profile, bottom right there, and it is Larsen was winning as black. And then on this move, in this position, he blundered, and the game petered out to a draw. Okay, so let's have a look at the game continuation. F4. Looks good. We're just going to go through the it's a really good example of a rook endgame. I'm not going to sort of challenge you, pick the move and all that sort of stuff, right? So what actually happened here is that we'll do the next move, is it just makes the e-pawn remarkably weak. And you'll see the alternative move, we'll go back and look at it, king g4, would have been able to defend his e-pawn. E-pawn just can't do anything about it. From this position, rook c2 check was played. Let's just go through a couple of the other continuations. Well, king g4, we just pick up e-pawn, that's obviously drawn. And if we push forward with check, then we just block. And if black tries to hold the f-pawn, check, f-pawn dropping, and, even if in this line we took the h-pawn off, we're going to take off the e-pawn's going to drop. That is obviously a drawn position, right? So after rook e6, so rook c2 check looks best. That actually forces the white king onto the back rank, which is what happens. Now you could do something about the e-pawn. Actually checked again, but if e3 is played, then we advance our pawn. The black rook has to drop back, and then now all the pawns are going to drop. Here, king g5, rook f7, you're not getting anywhere. Your rook's not moving. The pawn's probably going to drop after we move our king up to f3. Okay, let's go back. So what was played was rook check on the back rank, but now we play king to d2. So what Larsen was relying upon is getting his rook around to stop the white pawn. Now we take off the e-pawn. If the f-pawn dropped, then obviously we draw. Hold our h-pawn. So now here's the possibility of using the advanced f-pawn as winning resource, but check, check. Would peter out to a draw because it's actually game continuation. I don't know if I would have done that, but and then this came to draw, right? So see, the point is that if we go back to the relevant bit, black plays f3, check. If the king f2, try another thing. What happens if we put the king in front of the pawn? And black might end up in a bit of other ways of doing it. Check, king d2, check. I mean, it's just a draw. Black can't make progress. So yeah, that was kind of interesting when you look at this position here. F4 threw away the draw. So what was the winning line? Okay, we move our king across. Might as well pick up the a-pawn while we can. Check, check. Right, controlling the white h-pawn, and obviously this nice umbrella. That pawn is going through. In fact, if you look at that, it's a fairly easy or straightforward win by moving the king across and the king supporting the protected passed pawns, and that would be a more typical outcome. So Larsen didn't do that, so he really missed his chance in that game. So let's go along to the next one, which is also another rook endgame. So these are really tough games. Okay, so that is the position, and you can see there is a pair of double errors. First of all, around this position, and then also about 15 moves later on. We'll look at both of them. This is very instructive. I mean, look, this is a simple in inverted commas, right? 2 versus 1, people must know the outcomes. You'd expect this is a drawn position, okay? So look at what was played. So in this position, there's a move which is played, and then a move which wasn't played, right? So the move played, b3, actually loses. We'll go over that in a second. The correct move is king to d8, right? So obviously just get our king, going to cover the e-pawn, and this A and B pawn are most likely going to get exchanged. Push the pawn from behind. Check. 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 Now, although this is a short side defense, it actually works in this position because you're going to get the king. I mean, our whole point is we get our king in front of the pawn. We're also covering the A pawn, so they'll get swapped off and we'll have a king in front of the pawn. I mean, obviously you need to do some setup of philidors or later. So that is a drawing line. B3 is not, and Y takes. So this is now winning for white. King to D6, that is correct. Obviously threatening to check the black king miles away, so we're going to do something about that. Check, and then now we play in this position. Strangely, Larsen played king to E6, which we'll go over that game continuation second, but the winning move was king to E7. Now the point about that is that, as I've highlighted there, it's blocking out the black king. Black king can't get in front of the pawn now. Typical continuation might be get your rook behind the pawn. I do cover another line, we'll look at that in a second. Now we cover the pawn with our rook. And just to go over a line and show how this works. The thing is that the black king is well cut off and we'll just advance our pawn. Right, and what I wanted to show also is rook h3, swing over to the, but unfortunately it's the short side. Hold the pawn, check, check, throw the rook away, pawn, check, check. Both moves win. Right, just moving forwards, and we will promote our pawn. And if black checks us, then it actually doesn't help. We'll just march back up the board. Right, so that was in this position. King e7 won. King e6, the game continuation does not win. So let's go through why. At this stage, people play accurately. Now, if we compare it with the previous line, in most instances, we can't now move to e7 because of the skewer. In most instances now, the black king can get to e8 and in front of the e pawn, and you'll end up with, in many cases, a drawn endgame. So let's see what white did in the game. Check. I was saying king e7 is a possible move. Then check, check, and then the pawn's probably going to drop in all likelihood. So that doesn't work very well, because the pawn hasn't advanced far enough. Out here, so the game continuation was rook f8. Sort of going through a few of the lines, which might be of interest. Get behind the pawn advances, and the pawn. Okay, so can't really get the king out of the way. Pawn drops, so makes sense. It's a standard technique of supporting the pawn. Okay, short side. Check. Trying to move around to all. This is all drawn at this stage. Check. Check. Looks like almost given up. Now, it gets back to the thing where short side works in this case. Getting your rook stuck behind your king does not, right? So, what should have been played by Tal was rook to h3, as it wasn't a continuation, and then you might have a king drops back, moves across, gets in front, the other line is a check, and then we just obviously block there, and we're going to get in front, and going to be some version of philidors. But what was played was rook to b3, and now there's a winning move, which Larsen doesn't play. I find this amazing. There must have been a lot of time trouble, right? So what was played was rook to f8. So that. Get behind the pawn again. It's back to being drawn. Looks like a king getting in front, but needs to check. Defending on the short side. Ah, right. Okay, this is the thing. Because the rook had to defend the pawn, it's in an unfortunate situation where you can counteract the rook, and this is now a draw. Okay, so back to when rook b3 was played, and that is a mistake. So what should have been played here was king to e7. Now nothing can be done. If the rook was on h3, then would have been able to do the checking from that side, but now we can't do anything. There's no checks. Okay, gives some range. You can see this is not looking good. check in the front, pawn advances, and this is just totally winning. Yeah, so that's the you can see that this is these two bobbled here, which we were looking at. Blunder by Tal, mirrored by Larsen, a blunder by Tal, mirrored by Larsen straight away. So that was end up being a draw. Very, very strange position. I mean, maybe you would say the game should have been drawn because it was at this position. Here's an equal position, and then they're both always blunders. Anyway, very interesting. You could spend a lot of time looking at that and all those sort of little nuances in terms of what draws and what doesn't draw. Anyway, I found that very interesting. So this was Tal-Larsen, two pretty theoretical rook end games which had blunders in them. So I always find that quite interesting. Okay, now we're going to go to semi-final 2, which is Spassky versus Geller. Okay, so in this semi-final, you can see there was a blunder each, one blunder each, and of it, Spassky fairly comfortably +3 against Geller. And we're looking at this game here, which is round number 6, where you can see that it's sort of fairly even, and Geller makes a mistake, and he's lost from then on. So let's have a look at that. It happens quite early in the game as well. Yeah, so quite curious, this blunder in inverted commas. So bishop f8 was played. You can see g6 is suggested, right? And this is just missed a bishop sacrifice. So game continuation, check. Can take, well, you cannot take, but doesn't help. And now you do g6 check, which opens up the diagonal, opens up this square for the knight, and Geller drop back. Can also take, and now just move the knight up. Eventually that pawn's going to be taken, and then this is the route for the queen getting across to checkmating on that square because the knight's covering that square, and the bishop's holding the knight. And let's see where this game goes. There, just takes it. So this is game continuation where you got two pieces. You just go back to here where the alternative will be just taking the pawn, but then you get the same line, knight check. Actually, taking is given as the best move because you drop back, queen up. Queen to f3, you end up in the same, transpose the same position. So you go back to the original position where bishop f8 was played. Actually, you just had to block that diagonal with g6, and yeah, you're under pressure, but everything's fine. Okay, so that was the blunder by Geller in that match, but as I say, Spassky won fairly comfortably. And now we're going to look at the final, which is one game in the final, which is Spassky-Tal. I mean, like, so these are big names, and is it just the final itself? You can see that Spassky ran away 3-zip. It was basically a blunder each, so Spassky said he was stronger. This game, I find just the position here quite confusing. I'm only including because I wanted to sort of quickly overview the final of the candidates. Obviously, Spassky then lost to Petrosian, and then just sort of show one of the games from it. Now you can see that it was Spassky's under pressure, but should be drawable. And then King f4 loses. Let's have a look at how King f4 loses. We're sort of it's quite tricky. This I got to have my brain around yet. King f4, and then game continuation. Rook to e2. Rook cannot be taken because the pawn would queen. So now look at this. So what's black going to do? Okay. Now remember that the problem here is the king doesn't have any moves, and so knight moves, and then that was. Now we take the bishop. Bishop takes, but then the problem is that I think that's where Spassky actually resigned, because this pawn will cost that bishop. Go back to here when King f4 was played. Actually put the king in a bad spot. What should have been played was bishop to f3, and you'll see this, it works out differently. We can still play that move. King comes across, knight attacks the rook, goes somewhere. And you end up with a different situation where white is able to maneuver around, pick up that dangerous pawn, and it'll peter out the draw. I know it wasn't a particularly outstanding blunder, but I just wanted to include one of the games from the final match. I didn't. There was another one which I was going to include, but it was also a little bit tricky like that. So that was just the first attempt at doing one of these sort of match-based candidates, and I think I've got to change my Python script around to be able to handle it. So that was the outcome of the 1965 candidates, and next time we will be doing 1968. Hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching.